Okay. So welcome to the second part of the Engstrom Hour, as our friend Jeff Fritz kindly named it the other day. Today, I will give you two practical examples of how to improve your UX and the top two accessibility mistakes and how to fix them. But before we start, I want to clear up some of the confusion and misconceptions about UI and UX, because there are a lot of uncertainties. And you've probably seen images like this or similar, where we have the classic glass bottle of ketchup, which represents UI. And then we have this squeezy plastic bottle, which represents UX. Or examples like this. We have the before UX and after UX. Well, you can't just add UX like it's some sort of magical pixie dust or something. Of course, we can improve on it, but I see it like this. All of them is a UI, and all of them have a UX, how we use the bottle. So what I'm trying to say is that both a bad and a good experience is equally as much a UX, the experience we're having. And as we clearly can see, this person is not having a great experience with the plastic squeezy bottle. But I do like when we try to include as many people as possible, so this is actually my favorite ketchup package. It caters to those who want to dip their fries and those who prefer squeezing it all over. So I like that. But as humans, we do have limitations. We have our sight is limited, our attention is limited, and our memory is limited, just to name a few of our limitations. But if we design with those limitations in mind, the user will benefit so much from that. They will perceive our application as faster, easier, more intuitive, and sometimes even better looking. In psychology, there's something called cognitive load. So I usually compare our brains to the CPU of a computer, the processor. So if we have, you probably know this, if you have several heavy processes running at the same time, your computer will get a little bit sluggish, a little bit slower, a little bit less responsive. And same thing with our brains. Everything from distractions to conflicting information or even having too much information will have the same effect on our brains. So if we overload the user with too many choices or unnecessary actions, we will make them sluggish, and they might lose their train of thought, and they might get irritated or slower. Now, I do like shopping, and as you saw, we like gadgets. So we shop a lot, mainly online. But there's no way I will remember half of these numbers if my credit card looked like this. But if we break it up into chunks, it is so much easier to read, and it reduces that cognitive load I was talking about. So in a way, credit cards is, well, and shopping is pretty good example of reducing the cognitive load. So we can all get away with saying, I'm just trying to see if it reduces my cognitive load. It's not that I have a shopping addiction. That's what I'm using. But the same is also true for applications. If we take form as a little bit more practical example, we will do that, but I will also warn you, I will change the theme now to a lighter theme. So if you have sensitive eyes, blink. This is a form, a regular form, just some data, some input boxes. It's even aligned to a grid, which I do prefer. But if we are putting the labels to the left of the input boxes, we get a total of 32 visual fixations. And that's 32 places where the user needs to stop, pause, read, and continue. Because we are trained to read in a certain pattern. And in the Western world, we read from left to right and top to bottom, kind of a zigzag thing going on here. So by simply moving the labels on top and having them above the input boxes instead, we are decreasing the number of visual fixations for the user by almost half. But there's more we can do, of course. Like, don't blindly use a template. Actually think about what we need to ask for. Is it really relevant data what gender I identify with when I sign up for a blog site? It is so much easier for the user and for us if we ask only for what we need. I will also remove age range, which we can get programmatically from the date of birth, if age is a factor we need to factor in here. And marital status, I feel that it's kind of a little outdated, so let's remove that one as well. Other things that I have simplified here is asking for a full name instead of last and first name. I have changed the date of birth to one input instead of 3 drop-downs and so on. And if we, like in this case, we have too much to fit one screen, split it into multiple smaller, easier to digest pages. Now let's put the button, which should be clear as to what it does, right in the line of sight, going down in a straight line to the left. Because if we put it to the right, and I will remove myself for a second here, you will see if we're using some sort of enlargement tool, it will be very difficult to actually see that it's a button there. Things like letting the user know that they have succeeded is also very powerful. In this case, we have put a green frame around the input box. However, to be more inclusive, we should always make sure that there are other ways to figure out what's going on than depending on color alone. So let's add a symbol for that as well. And if you can, please display the errors before the user submits the form and not in a long list. And let them know where the issue is. And again, to elevate our color accessibility, we put this symbol together with the color so everyone can see it. And please don't blame the user by saying stuff like, you put in the wrong date and things like that. Be as clear as possible. Think for the user. Don't make them wonder what you mean wrong. What should I have done? And so on. So let's ask for the exact format we want, and also don't blame the user. So there we go. Now the user knows exactly how we wanted them to fill in the form. So with just a few steps, we went from this one to this. Now, of course, there's tons more we can improve on, but this is a long way still. And it has so much benefits both for the user, but also for us because they will actually complete them. Other things we could do is always have an exit for the user so they can opt out at any time, or making sure that they can go back in the UI if they want to change something when they have gone to the next page. And use a contrasting color for the input boxes. Now, if you want to get even more tips on forms, like why I have started the progress bar before the user even filled anything in and stuff like that, you can check out the .NET Conf Focus on Windows talk I did a while back, where I have a few more examples and why I did that. So we all want our user to navigate through our interface with ease. So we need to design things in a way that we take advantage of that natural human cognitive process. And that means we need to reduce interference. Because if things are arranged in a way that we understand the hierarchy, we will lower that cognitive load again. And because we don't have to figure out what's most important, and we don't have to think about all that stuff. Now, you have probably seen examples like this before. It's so much easier to read the written color when it's colored neutral or congruent. But when we scramble the colors, it takes a little bit more effort. I mean, we can read it, There's no question about it, but it's not as effective. Same thing with this example. A lot of the Western world associate red with stop and green with go. Therefore, we get a slight conflict. And I mean, I put these images there, but I keep reading stop on the red circle. So by giving the users clear instructions and also clear error messages will make all the difference, because there will be stuff happening and the users will understand that. But if you put up an error message like this, the user will wonder what to do. Should they call the fire department? Should they press OK? Unplug the machine? I don't know. So this is kind of just scary. Or a message like this from a bank in Sweden. Null! What does null mean? Do I have any money? Do I have an account? What's going on? This is not helpful in the least. So let's continue with the 404 page as an example, which is when we can't find the page, right? And again, I will go over to a little bit lighter theme again. So anyone with sensitive eyes, blink for a second. So let's look at what makes a good error message. It uses plain language. So let's strike that. I mean, they sort of are in places here, but you also have a bunch of technical jargon that me as an average user might not understand, which makes it a little bit scarier, or at least a little bit hesitant. A good error message is actionable, but we have no buttons, no URLs, and not even a suggestion on what actions to take next here. And depending on what your page or application does, we can put in like a search box so the user can try to search what you're looking for, or we can put in a way to get back to the start page so they can regroup and start over. The message itself should be short, because we all know that nobody reads the EULA because it's too long, it's overwhelming, so it does not add to the clarity. So I will give them that. This error message, it is short. Explain how to fix it if it's fixable. Now in this example, we get a bunch of uncertainty. It might have been removed, it might have been changed, the name have been changed, and it might be temporarily unavailable. So no points for them. Sometimes, of course, we can't provide a solution, but we can give options. We can add buttons, URLs, what have yous to try to solve the issue. If we have a shop, we could add images to popular items or the next sale or whatever we want. And that will feel so much helpful for the user. So they will feel, hey, they're helping me out, rather than I made an oopsie. So we will sell more, they will feel better. So it's kind of a win-win situation. And like I said before, never blame the user. Never put the blame on the user. Be humble about it. Because honestly, it's not the user's fault that we could not cover 100% of the things that could go wrong. Now, in this case, we're not directly blaming the user, but we're not taking responsibility either. Because using words like something went wrong or failed, will inadvertently put some blame on the user. Same goes for the color red here. Again, in the Western world, red is usually associated with either stop or an error and things like that. So let's look at another example. And I will walk a little bit over here so you can see it. Here, we are using plain language. I can't find the page you're looking for. And it is actionable with the provided URLs we have given them. And it's definitely short. We do give a solution to the user because they can choose from the handful of URLs, and we are not blaming the user. And be funny, be witty, be true to your brand, whatever that means. it's okay as long as we also fulfill the other 5 steps. So 5 steps, and we went from the left side to the right side. And I say that it's quite the difference. And again, this of course applies to all types of error messages, not just 404 pages. Okay, so let's throw ourselves into the world of accessibility. WebAIM, or Web Accessibility in Mind, they do an annual accessibility analysis of the top 1 million homepages. They have so much interesting data, like that the average number of elements per homepage is 887. Now, if you have an accessibility error rate, which they have come to the conclusion is almost 6%, that means that users with disabilities would expect to encounter an error once every 17 elements. Now, WebAIM are using the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, for the analysis. And it covers a wide range of recommendations for making web content more accessible. But just because it's targeted to the web doesn't mean that we can't use the same principles for applications and wherever we want to. It covers things from like visual, auditory, physical, speech, cognitive, language, learning, neurological disabilities. It is a lot. And of course, we can never cover 100% since there are a lot of variations and combinations of these disabilities. But it covers the vast majority. Now, this is pretty sad. 97.4% of homepages had detected WCAG failures. And actually, since these tests are automated, they don't detect all possible failure types, which means the number could be even worse. But the good news is that almost 97% of all the errors are just 6 categories. So if we address these handful of errors, we would significantly improve our accessibility. So we have low contrast text, missing alternative text or images, missing form input labels, empty links, missing document language, and empty buttons in the top 6. So let's look at the most common accessibility issues, which is contrast or low contrast text. 86.4% of all pages have this issue. On average, there was 31 distinct instances of low contrast text on each homepage. And here's the light theme warning again. Blink if you have sensitive eyes. So contrast is a way to measure the perceived difference in luminance or brightness between 2 colors. And we use a ratio to express this ranging from 1:1, which is white on white, to 21:1, which is black on white, or white on black. It's the same thing. And as a reference, red, and I mean red only, is 4:1, and blue is 8.6:1. Now, in the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, there are recommendations for the minimum amount of contrast you should use for most of your text. And the minimum recommended contrast for most of your text is 4.5:1. And I would say that it's pretty clear why this is a minimum recommendation. Personally, I would recommend that you go all the way and use the enhanced contrast recommendation instead, which is AAA with 7:1, which is a little better. My absolute favorite, which I use the most, is this one, 15.55, because it's not as bright as pure black on pure white. You know, when you have white text on black background, sometimes the white text follow you around a little and it gets a little blurry. You don't get that here, which I kind of like, but it still has a bunch of contrast. There are a lot of tools that can help us when it comes to contrast and things like that. So let me show you a couple of them really quick. So I will share my screen here and you will see a web browser. I'm using Edge, but this works in Chrome and probably all the other tools as well, the browser developer tools. So I'm going to press F12, and in the menu, the three dots, we have more tools and something called rendering. So if we click on that, which I already have here, we can scroll down. We can emulate so many cool things like light and dark theme and a lot of cool stuff. But we can also emulate color vision deficiencies like this one. We can browse our webpage and see how it looks from the eyes of someone who has this particular color deficiency. And we can cycle through them because there are different ones. So we see how it looks. But my absolute favorite is actually the one called blurred vision. Because look at this. All of a sudden, let me go to About Us. All of a sudden, it's kind of clear that we can read the headings and the headers and the subheaders and things like that. But when it comes to the text, I think we could go a step up, right? So emulating things like this is super helpful. But I talked about contrast. So we do have a contrastchecker.com, for instance. There's plenty more tools like this where we can put in our colors and we see if we pass or if we fail. So we can just go in here and see, well, I'm compliant with AA, but I want to be compliant with AAA. So let's see if we can fix that by tweaking the numbers a little. And we can see the ratio on the middle of the screen. We have the green colors for, or the check mark for when we have passed. And we can even put in an image and it will tell you if it has good gradient, good contrast or not. Or like me, I'm doing a lot of color stuff, and I use color.adobe.com, and they too have tools for accessibility. So this is a color scheme that I'm using for Coding After Work, the homepage. So I click on Edit for Accessibility, and up here in Tools to the left, it says Colorblind. Let me zoom in so you can actually see that. There we go. It says Colorblind Safe, which is the tool where we can see how it would look down here if you have a certain type of color deficiency. But they also have another tool here. Let me check the contrast checker. So this works the same way as the contrastchecker.com, and we can even say we want to conform to AAA instead of AA. And they also suggest other things. Like now we have a contrast ratio of 4.5, which is not good enough for AAA. And they have suggested one over here, which is 7. So they are doing part of the work for me, which is pretty nice of them. And again, there are plenty of more tools, but it is available everywhere for us to use. Now, the second most common accessibility issues is images and alternative text. A third of the images on the web are of no use to a large group. On top of that, sometimes we get a little lazy and we want to get a quick fix. So 10% of the images had, let's call them questionable alt text, like image in this case, or blank, or the file name. And I do get that we have time restraint, we must live up to certain requirements set by the higher ups and whatever it can be. But cheating like this, it's just a slap in the face to anyone who depends on alt text. Why pretend that you're accessible only to do this? It doesn't take that much more effort to type a helpful descriptive text compared to image or graphic. So let's jump into what is an alternative text. So it's a textual substitute for non-text content like images. Alternative text have several functions, like screen readers will announce the alternative text instead of the images to help those with either visual or certain cognitive disabilities to perceive the content and function of the images. And on the web, if for some reason our page just doesn't load, the user might have blocked images or we have internet connections issues, the browser will show the alt text instead, so we don't lose that context. And then search engines also use it to factor in a lot of stuff. And technology is getting a lot better than before at recognizing what an image depicts automatically. Just a year ago, this was a parrot. And I would say that this is not a parrot. Today, it is instead interpreted as a cat wearing a garment, which I think is pretty close, right? It looks like a cat wearing a garment. My point here is that even though they might be able to say what the image actually depicts, it can't know what the image means within the context of the page. So we need to provide an alternative text that represents content and functions in our images. So in our case, we have a story on the page, and it's actually a cat who wants to be a unicorn, which a cat wearing a garment make no sense to. So let's use this image as an example. I need to get as many cats in as possible, right? Now we can use alternative text in two ways. We can put an actual visible text near the image, and we can use the alt attribute of the image element. Now I did say that we should consider content and function. And what I mean by function is if it's linked or if it's used in a button and things like that. If it's just for decoration, a description is enough. So let's look at two things not to do when it comes to alt text. Don't be redundant or repeat the same information as the text near the image. If you already have a text visible around the image, put something else in your alt text. Or in this case, you can actually leave it empty because the screen readers will still get the context. And don't include phrases like image of or graphics of, because saying image of a white cat, the screen readers will actually read image of a white cat, so it's kind of a redundant. Now, two things we should do. Be accurate in representing both content and function. And in this example, again, we have no function, but it's important to the rest of the content of our story or our narrative that it's a festive and sparkly antlers this cat is wearing. Also be succinct without sacrificing accuracy, I should say. A few words up to a short sentence or two is good. Because I don't think, look at this, if I remove myself again, a white cat with yellow eyes wearing sparkly festive antlers with green and red pom-poms laying on a basket. I don't think that adds to the story. So a white cat with sparkly festive antlers is a better way to go for us in this case. Now, if there is one thing I want you to take away from this presentation is that UX and accessibility is not something that should come at the end stages of development as an afterthought. It should not be the feeling of, oh, I need to make it usable for the people who have a certain disability. It might very well be that you don't expect any amputees using your application, so you don't want to implement the one-handed navigation. But by excluding them, you are also excluding users who are temporarily out of commission with one of their arms because they broke it or something. Or parents who have babies. And the same thing goes for visual and auditory, speech, cognitive, language, neurological disabilities. So stop looking at it as a disability and start looking at it as a way to include more people. Thank you. Now, if you want the links to all the resources I've mentioned and a few more, you can find them on my blog, which is a little bit on the low side, but it's engstromjess.se.
All right. Thank you, Jessica. That was a very insightful session. With so many subtle, with even the subtle change, how much we can make it more inclusive for people, that's really
Yeah.
brilliant. Also, most of the problems that we solve in tech are people problems, right? And it is
Yeah.
more important than ever to be able to include these things. And also, like, we have technology now, we have those nice tools available. It's all about
Yeah.
putting that effort in.
Yeah, exactly. And it's better. You don't have to be 100% covered. Just
Right.
start somewhere. Start with one thing. Start with two things. That will make so much difference to anyone. And then we can work from there.
Right. I also noticed that you brought in that color.adobe.com. Like, is that a
Yeah.
free thing, or is it something which you need to pay
Yes,
to access?
the color tool is free.
Hmm.
You need to sign in though. I think. Yeah, I think you can use it, but you can't save it if you don't sign in. So
Okay.
if you want to save your things, you need to sign in. But that's also just a free account.
All right. Cool. Yeah.
But if you're
Thank you so
paying for
much.
it, you can actually get it inside your Adobe tools. It will
Right.
automatically suck all that in. So yeah,
Understood. Understood. So, Jessica, I don't see any questions right now on the stream.
awesome,
So probably people are watching it later, and then you will have more questions to your Twitter feed, maybe.
awesome.
All right.
I
Thank you
will
so
look
much,
it up.
Jessica.
Thank you.